had made up my mind that I would never again confuse professional attention with personal affection. The men I work with could be colleagues, mentors, political allies, or even opponents, but they would not become my lovers. What I had not yet understood was that keeping men out of my bed would not keep me out of their world. Jamaican politics at the beginning of the new millennium belonged overwhelmingly to men, or at least the position of visible power did. Women filled the offices, organized the meetings, mobilized the communities, and carried out the instructions, while men chaired the meetings, made the speeches, and were introduced as leaders. You see, if I wanted a place among them, nobody was going to pull out a chair and invite me to sit. I would have to claim one for myself. And so, to understand my journey into politics, you first have to understand Jamaica's political structure. The Jamaica Labour Party, the JLP, and the People's National Party, PNP, were and remain the country's two major political parties. Jamaica was divided into constituencies, with each constituency electing a representative during the general election. The candidate who received the most votes became the member of parliament for that constituency. And each constituency was further divided into electoral divisions that is represented by municipal level that are called councillors. The Jamaican Parliament was a bicameral model on the British system, and for many years, the Queen of England was Jamaica's head of state. My constituency had two electoral divisions. At the time, the Member of Parliament chaired the constituency organization, while each division comprised several communities. The chairman of my division was represented by the People's National Party in several local government elections, but failed to secure a victory. He therefore served not only as a divisional chairman, but also as the party's caretaker councillor for my division. His opponent, the elected councillor, represented the Jamaica Labour Party, the PNP's fiercest political rival. As I carefully climbed the steps to the old decrepit building, I reflected on how passionate Jamaicans could be about politics. Raised voices poured from the room where our divisional meeting was being held. It sounded as though fireworks was going off inside. The two-story building had housed some kind of business in the early 1900s, but it seems to have since been divided primarily into residential spaces. A bar, a barber shop, small shoe repair shop, and food services buildings were crammed into the ground floor. The main entrance opened into several tiny rooms that people now call their home, and the staircase to the upper level began almost immediately inside the doorway. The building appeared not to have undergone any significant repairs since its construction. It had not seen a coat of paint in years, and if you stood on the opposite side of East Queen Street and studied it carefully, you could see how decades of hurricane, minor earthquakes, and general wear and tear had affected the upper floor. One of the steps was missing, so anyone going up the stairs had to climb across that gap. I ignored the roaches scurrying along the walls, the open sewage running past the entrance, and the occasional rodent that appeared far too comfortable in its surrounding. Covering my nose against the smell, I hurried towards the meeting room. Before I could enter, I had to pass through what appeared to be someone else's bedroom. A bed, stove, and pieces of furniture filled the space leading to the divisional meeting room. The only privacy the family had came from a few curtains strung from one end of the room to the other, and I remembered how shocked I'd been the first time I attended one of our weekly meetings there. People were living like this. Then I thought about the small room I shared with my mother and baby girl. We cooked in the same room in which we slept in, sometimes preparing our meals over coals burning inside a tire rim in the corner. A dog pen sat directly across from the room Mommy and I shared, and between the dogs and the coal smoke, it was no wonder I suffered constant asthma attack. When I entered the meeting room, I discovered that we were meeting by lamplight that evening. A home sweet home kerosene lamp sat at the head table directly in front of the divisional chairman, who was engaged in an almighty showing match with another male member. The wick had been turned up so high that soot had blackened part of the lamp glass shade. The divisional secretary sat beside the chairman, painstakingly recording the minutes. The room was stifling, even though the windows were open, and no air seemed to be passing through the room. People from communities across the division had already filled the room, fanning themselves with pieces of paper, scraps of cardboard, or even their bare hands, but still they stayed. Standing in the doorway, willing my eyes to adjust to the dim light, I again questioned why I had chosen to become this involved. My decision to participate more actively in my community's political process was not simply because of the person for whom I worked, although my job gave me an opportunity to learn. My involvement with the police youth club, my football team, and the citizen association that I'd been involved with had begun long before I imagined even entering the party politics. People were rapidly losing trust in the political process and its representatives, and I couldn't blame them. My own experience with a former member of parliament had left me deeply cynical. Still, I loved my community with all its imperfections. I wanted to understand the process instead of sitting on the sidelines and complaining about it. There was something hypocritical, I felt, about condemning a system I knew little about while remaining unwilling to help change it. I returned to my community group meetings, resumed my role as a secretary, and began working from there. It was not easy to balance political involvement, motherhood, and employment. I was away from home often, many nights. Mommy had to help my daughter with her homework because I was attending meetings. On other nights, arrived home so exhausted that I fell asleep almost immediately. Attending meetings in my community at the divisional level and at party headquarters, that was also exhausting. On average, 3 of my 5 nights per week were devoted to meetings, writing reports, and expanding my understandings of the internal workings of the People's National Party. Politics could be exciting, but it could also leave you feeling unappreciated, particularly when the party that was in power and desperate community members could see no improvement in their life. That same power imbalance was on display in the room before me. Men occupied approximately 90% of the division's leadership position, while women were largely expected to perform the administrative work. Even my position as a youth representative had previously been held by a man. I strongly suspected that the leadership had agreed to elect me because they believed I could be submissive to them. They were sadly mistaken. At almost every meeting, heated arguments erupted among the male leaders. The discussion frequently continued until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and by the time I walked home, it was even later. I still had to wake up exceptionally early the following morning, prepare my daughter for school to reach to work on time. You're late, comrade. You're late, comrade youth leader, the chairman said, staring at me from across the room with disbelief on his face. He instructed the secretary to record my tardiness in the minutes, then curtly reminded me of my divisional responsibilities. Internally, I bristled. I was angry. The workday had been very difficult, and I had walked directly from my office to attend this meeting. When it was over, I would have to walk home in the night in some dangerous part of my division. I was drained and I was in no mood to go back and forth with him. Instead, I apologized and I ventured further into the hot, dimly lit room. The mass of bodies made the heat in the room even worse. As the floorboards squeaked beneath my feet, I reminded myself repeatedly that I was there because I wanted to learn. I wanted to participate in the process of change. The division was led by one of the most stubborn male chauvinists I'd ever encountered, and he was surrounded by men who were not only sexist, but they did not believe a woman could lead effectively. They never said it plainly, but their behavior towards me and other women made it clear. At both the divisional and higher levels, they continued to support male colleagues who had repeatedly demonstrated that they could not lead. Their loyalty to those men were astounding. The chairman was not entirely without good qualities, though. He genuinely wanted what he believed was the best for the division and constantly led the charge in demanding resources and attention for it. But he had also held power for years without showing any willingness to make space for someone else. Young people on both sides of the political divide were becoming disillusioned with politics. When I expressed an interest in becoming involved, it was therefore unsurprising that I was amongst the youngest members of the team. Alongside other young people in my division, I'd helped establish several political youth groups. We held regular meetings, and I ensured that information from party headquarters reached young people throughout the division. However, having those groups formally registered became a lengthy and exhausting process. The chairman made it even more frustrating by withholding his support, although he had attended several of our meetings and saw that it was thriving. I believe he considered the new youth group a threat to his position, especially because some of the youngest leaders were determined young women as well. I thought the party needed succession planning. Nobody would live forever, and meaningful change could not occur unless the voices of young people and women were included. Many women and youths from the communities that made up the division also believed that they were being controlled by patriarchal leadership. Still, I had to be careful whenever I raised the subject of charge with the chairman. During these tense discussions, I sometimes had to let him believe that he had won while quietly searching for another route to a solution. At other times, I had to approach Mr. Thwaites, the constituency chairman, and ask him to intervene in our arguments. By the time my daughter was 5 years old and preparing to start primary school, exhaustion had become second nature to me. But I had also learned how to negotiate with headstrong chauvinistic men like my divisional chairman. Political work occupied so much of my life that I had very little personal time. My sisters often visited mommy and helped as much as they could. My aunt had also returned to Jamaica after living in America for several years, and her family was finalizing the purchase of the property on which they had lived for decades. She had saved some money and shipped home a few barrels and was intended to start her small business that could generate an income. You see, when I was a child and my mother reprimanded me, my aunt was a person to whom I ran. Her yard, filled with my cousins, had been my safe haven. During some of the hardest period of my life, one of my female cousins had grown closer than blood. She became my best friend. It therefore came as a surprise to discover that my aunt seemed to have changed after her returning to Jamaica. She had aged considerably, and the motherly affection she once showed me was no longer as evident. One day, I came home and overheard her reprimanding mommy for accepting me after my pregnancy. She told her that I would never amount to anything because I'd become pregnant by my daughter's father. Her words cut me to the core. This was a woman to whom I'd once turned for comfort. Hearing her speak about me that way damaged our relationship in a place I did not know how to repair. I let them know that I'd heard the conversation. I reminded my aunt that I had a job and was contributing to the household. She said nothing. She went home, and after that, she did not visit her sister as often as she once had. I knew the relationship was truly broken when I'd asked her for financial help one Saturday morning. Throughout that week, Mommy had been feverish and complaining that it was difficult for her to urinate. I had been so concerned, but I did not realize how serious it was. Then, on Saturday morning, my mom began passing blood in her urine. Her skin was extremely hot to the touch, and I knew I needed to take her to the hospital immediately. But I had no money to bring her to the hospital. So my anxiety surged. I rushed to my aunt and I asked her to lend me enough to take my mother to the hospital, promising to repay her when I received my salary. I explained everything that had happened. My heart tightened when she answered, "Me not have no money for lend because the money me have is to pay for my partner." She was doing some savings and she felt that that money was better for the savings rather than to loan me to take her own sister to the hospital. That sentence stayed with me for years. Out of options, I did something I never imagined doing. I contacted my boss and begged him for help. He did not hesitate. Mr. Thwaites had been carrying out his church duties as a deacon, but he stopped what he was doing to immediately assist us. Still dressed in his deacon's collar, he arrived with an envelope containing money and had prayed over Mommy before he left. I cried. Mommy, through her own tears, told me never to forget this kindness. Mr. Thwaites was by no means a saint. He disliked idle conversation in the office, was a stickler for details, and insisted that we arrive at work on time. He could also be moody, but he possessed qualities that made me grateful to work for him. And this was one of those qualities. That day, I began reflecting on how much of a father's role he had unknowingly begun to play in my life. I was given several days away from work to care for Mommy, who remained at the Kingston Public Hospital for almost a week. Her diabetes was dangerously uncontrolled and had begun affecting her kidneys. When I brought her home, she still had a catheter and could not properly care for herself, much less to look after my daughter. I was working, mothering, attending political meetings, and now caring for my sick mother. Something just had to give. I needed just a little time to breathe and enough stillness to put some kind of plan together. Anyway, the following Monday morning, I walked into the office trying to summon the courage to ask my boss for a salary increase. I decided to enroll my daughter in an after school program and to ask one of my friends to check on Mommy during the day. That way, Ashley would be otherwise preoccupied and Mommy would not have to look after her since she was already sick. I would also have to arrange transportation to take my daughter to school in the morning and to bring her home back in the afternoons, hoping that by the time she got home shortly after, I would also be home. These arrangements would give me enough time to prepare healthy meals for Mommy in the mornings, purchase her toiletries, and ensure that she took her medication and make sure that she was ready for the day. My salary was simply not enough to cover everything. I worried that the additional expenses would leave us owing rent again or paying other bills later than we should. Whenever I thought about our financial situation, I could not help imagining where I might have been if I had completed university. Perhaps I would have graduated by then, and maybe I would have found a job that placed me in a better financial position. But it took money to make money, and neither Mommy nor I had any. I hesitated to ask for a raise for Mr. Thwaites because he had already helped me with Mommy's hospital expenses. I did not want to seem ungrateful or greedy. As luck, or perhaps God, would have it, I never had to ask. As I walked into the office, Mr. Thwaites began speaking to me about his plans to reorganize the office, his political office, and the law firm's practice. Mr. Thwaites has decided that I would be transferred permanently to the constituency office where I would work as a part of a small team. He would stop by after leaving the radio stations in the morning and would be present for constituency day and executive meeting. I would meet with him on a Friday at the law firm to discuss issues that may have arisen during the previous week and plan for the week ahead. This reorganization came with an increase of my salary. You can just imagine how happy I was. I wanted to shout Jesus' name right then and there. It felt as though someone had heard the need I had been too afraid to voice and had spoken through my employer to provide exactly what I required. The transition would be gradual to ensure that everything went smoothly, and I would also be responsible for hiring someone from the surrounding community to assist constituents who came to the office for written recommendations and other forms of support that Mr. Thwaites was not there to give. The constituency office was farther from my home than the law firm was, which meant a longer walk each day, but I was not about to complain. I was too grateful for the salary increase and the relief it would bring to my family. The transfer went smoothly. My name and face was already widely known throughout my side of the constituency. But working from the central office made me increasingly familiar to the residents of the other division. During the week, the office was usually quiet unless Mr. Thwaites was there. On his constituency days, people arrive in large number because they wanted to speak with him personally. That was understandable though. What I had not anticipated was how aggressive some people could become or the lengths to which they would go to obtain what they wanted. Mr. Thwaites firmly believed that everyone deserved respect, including his staff. However, some community members carried personal burdens that affected how they communicated with others. Whenever food packages or maybe back to school vouchers or other forms of assistance was being distributed, a few people inevitably became boisterous or attempted to bully their way ahead of everyone else. We had to be firm. We made it clear that we would help wherever we could, but we would not tolerate disrespect. Working in the constituency office exposed me to people with vastly different personalities, needs, and circumstances. It taught me how to communicate without surrendering my authority. It also strengthened the assertiveness I needed when dealing with men who believed that every woman they encountered should eventually end up in their bed. Life became repetitive, exhausting, and mentally draining. I rarely had an opportunity to enjoy being a young woman because I was constantly moving, working, and taking care of everyone around me. My days sometimes began at 4:30 in the morning and did not end until close to midnight when I finally collapsed into bed. Thankfully, Mommy was recovering. Her spicy personality returned along with her strength, and she informed me in no uncertain terms that she wanted real food. Not the salad and chicken or boiled pumpkin and boiled sweet potatoes and fish I kept preparing for her. Her catheter had been removed, and her skin was beginning to glow again instead of appearing ashy and dull while she was sick. Getting her to take her medication prescribed by her doctor remained a battle, but once she saw that it was helping, she committed herself to taking it properly. My daughter was also making tremendous progress. She had already been registered for what she proudly called Big Girl School. For the first time in a long time, everything seems to be settling into a manageable rhythm. And then I met him. I'd recently started dating myself. And so on some Friday evenings, I would leave work and went alone to the movies, or maybe treating myself to Pizza Hut in New Kingston, something along those lines. I was learning to enjoy my own company without waiting for a man or anyone else to accompany me. That particular Friday, I decided to buy something from Burger King on Lower King Street and then head home. As I walked towards the restaurant, I noticed a man approaching me. He was staring directly at me and smiling. At first, I paid him little attention, but the closer he came, the wider his smile became. And I wondered whether I knew him from somewhere. His gaze was so intense that I glanced over my shoulder to see whether or not he might have been smiling at someone behind me. When I turned around, I walked straight into him. He laughed softly and murmured an apology. "Do I know you from somewhere?" I asked. "No," he replied, still smiling. "But I would like to get to know you," he said. My eyes widened as I looked over him. Why would he want to get to know me? It might have seemed like a ridiculous question, but at that moment, I felt that that question was entirely reasonable. He had an accent I could not immediately place, curly hair and a light olive complexion. He was neatly dressed as though he had just left an office and appeared exceptionally well put together. I immediately remember my office fling and how deceptive well-dressed men could be. I also could not understand why he would be interested in me. I did not consider myself a great beauty, and he seemed like the type of man who dated women who look as though they stepped from the pages of a magazine. Well, if you give him your number, he probably won't call anyway, I thought. I shrugged. "Give me your pen," I said. He handed me the pen and I scribbled my telephone number across the palm of his hand. "Call me," I said, stepping around him. I walked away, almost certain that I would never hear from him again. I'd done something similar with other men numerous times before. There was only one difference this time. I had given him the correct number. But by the time I stood in line at Burger King, studying the menu and breathing in the scent of burgers and fries, his face had already begun to disappear from my thoughts. To me, it had been nothing more than a brief encounter with a handsome stranger on an ordinary Friday evening. I could not have known that while my political life was gathering momentum, something far more personal had been set in motion. I thought I'd given a stranger my telephone number. In truth, I'd given the future a way to find me. Thank you for listening to Chapter 4 of Book 2 of my book, A Journey from Jamaica to Becoming. If you haven't done so yet, please remember to subscribe to my channel. Please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. What did you think about this chapter? Are you relating what I'm saying to this chapter to your own personal life? Have you listened to my other chapters yet? I really encourage you to do so. And also remember to share this chapter with your friends. Have a great day. Until I see you in the next one.